putting together the rundown for today, we want to address, I guess, one component around like counterparty risk. And in the context of pre-confirmations and block space commitments, one of the things is that if I'm a trader or a buyer of block space, or a pre-conf, and I'm buying this commitment from a validator or proposer, what type of guarantee do I have that that validator is going to honor this contract? And so in that context, they can provide collateral maybe in some shape or form, but what is the method? How do they actually do this in practice? And so for that, or in relation to that, I want to invite Brandon from Eigen to talk a little bit about that and share his and maybe some of the protocol's views on this.
Test, test, test. There we go. Yeah, a lot of the hard work was already done for me because you've already heard from most of the elements in the value chain for pre-confs. Having a user like based rollups that could come in and be the first big consumer of this and actually have standards established around it before some of those things go to market could really help with the bootstrapping of this thing. But I'll give a little more context on just how we've been thinking about pre-confs in general at EigenLayer, and also just kind of where we are in the process, because we have been saying for a year and a half that we're early, and I think we're still relatively early, but there are some good signs and a couple metrics that have started to pick up off of zero. So yeah, my name is Brandon Curtis. I'm Director of Strategy at Eigen Labs. We're building EigenLayer, which you've already heard about as a marketplace for extending Ethereum's trust to other sorts of services, both on-chain and off-chain. I think a pretty good bet in many elements of crypto is that if you see a trend, it's likely that the trend will continue, at least for some period. So over time, block space, it specializes. So in 2015, we basically just had very simple transaction fee auctions, all first price sort of stuff. You fit what you need to get in there. At the time, I was playing around quite a bit with priority gas auctions and all the sort of pre-MEV before it even got the name. But there wasn't a whole lot going on. There wasn't a lot of specialization among actors. And then over the last 10 years, now we see these sophisticated multi-party auctions. We have multiple specialized actors, sometimes to the detriment of the decentralization of this system, when there are only a few people globally who can keep up with some of the requirements to be competitive. And we have ideas like proposer-builder separation. And the argument I want to make is that this is just the first step on a journey of continued experiments in this area of block space specialization. So, why continue to evolve? MEV complexity is going to continue to increase. You heard, earlier, there's MEV obviously within every chain. We're starting to think about how cross-chain MEV starts to factor into things. You have, MEV on other networks. You have MEV on rollups. And so the sorts of decisions that we make about how these things are sequenced and what sort of commitments are created and by whom is going to have knock-on effects when you think about what actors are going to be in a position to extract value from these systems. Increasingly specialized block building, there have been a lot of experiments in this vein. If you go to like the Cosmos ecosystem, or you go look at like other different app chain ecosystems, so some of these like top of block problems, there have been experiments with trying to create fast lanes and trying to take specific sorts of transactions that are really important to a particular application and create kind of dedicated lanes for them. Very cool experiments, but on Ethereum, we want the platform to be neutral, and we still need a venue for doing experiments like this in a way that opts in, that preserves the decentralization of the set. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that these proposer commitments are the way to do that. And then, the last and most important thing is really just user and application demand for better user experience. You've heard UX probably more than any other acronym so far today here. Guaranteed inclusion, guarantees around ordering. It may be that the #1 use of block space is just swapping between meme coins, but there's a ways to go if you're trying to perfect even that and provide instant confirmation to users, provide a high degree of visibility into what's going on. And when I'm trading my $100 million worth of meme coins, making sure that I'm actually getting the sticker price that I was expecting. So key innovation here, it's proposer commitments. They enable just validators to create and sell a really wide range of binding commitments. And this creates some interesting dynamics and some interesting requirements to kind of set up a market around this. The outcome is you have these binding guarantees around TX inclusion, TX ordering, et cetera. So you get this crypto economic promise from a validator to perform specific block production actions in return for getting paid. So a couple panels ago, you heard from Kiln and Figment and Coinbase. They're running all this infrastructure. Capital providers and the infrastructure providers who serve them, of course, are interested in any new marginal source of revenue as BlackRock comes and they bring however much ETH they're going to manage to sweep up over the next year. The rates are going to come down. And so the competition to find uplift in new and interesting places. Of course, we have things like restaking going on, but proposer commitments create another avenue for this. So really the key properties that you need here, they need to be granular. So they can apply to specific blocks, transactions, or ordering constraints. The one I'm going to hit on in particular on the restaking side of things is they need to be enforceable. So violating a promise that you've made has to have consequences if you actually want to provide strong guarantees for whatever service is actually being provisioned by these pre-confs. And going back to sort of the philosophy behind Ethereum, keeping the validator set decentralized, doing our experiments in a way where we can get the data we need without making huge changes to the network that force everyone to follow along. These systems need to be opt-in, so validators can choose to participate for additional yield. And part of the goal as well of keeping the set really decentralized is keeping the barrier to entry here as low as possible. So whether you're running a single server in the garage on a rack somewhere, or you're running tens of thousands of validators, it should be equally easy to get yourself plugged into these opportunities and help provide these commitments that power these applications and services and get paid to do that. So a big design challenge here, you can make a lot of comparisons with MEV Boost, but a lot of the commitments that we're making here are longer term. And so the challenge, anytime you're kind of selling a position that has this duration element to it, is that by the time you actually have to honor the settlement of this thing, you may be out of the money. So if you're an operator, every once in a while you get that magic block that's got 40 ETH worth of fees in it. And so if you're participating in proposer commitments and you find out that you made these commitments, you got paid up a little upfront to do that, but then it turns out you're actually giving up a lot by honoring that commitment, you have to ask this question of what's keeping you from defecting? And there are a whole bunch of ways that you can start to attack this problem. I'm a big fan of the more gradual approach that just tries to get something out the door. And maybe you start with some sort of internal reputation system, and that gets you off the ground. But I think eventually you do need enforceable penalties to actually allow this thing to scale, to have an open set of participants and strong guarantees. Yeah, so again, we're aligning incentives. Apps can pay for guaranteed block inclusion and ordering. Proposers are an extra revenue. We have these user demands for guarantees, whether that's just better user experience or certain particular features. They really want to get that transaction through and they're getting censored. That leads to these applications demanding these block space commitments and then being willing to also pay for these to generate that extra revenue for proposers. The money has to come from somewhere anytime there's uplift. So there are already conversations happening. People are asking me, is it going to be 2% uplift? Is it going to be 1%? good question. Somebody needs to be willing to pay for whatever money is coming in. And if we're talking about getting 50% plus of the validator set actually participating in these things, you can do the math on the amount of revenue that you need. And so there's some questions here around what guarantees might the application layer compete to actually provision for users. I think another trend over the last 10 years has been competition to innovate on different ways of incentivizing users. If you're launching the 200th DEX, you need to have something that's going to pull users away from whatever their normal venue is that they're comfortable with. And so proposer commitments, by provisioning new services that provide new application level features, give applications another way to throw money at the problem and create a differentiated experience that actually gets them the ability to get people in the door. In terms of MEV mitigation, credible commitments can reduce front running and reordering attacks. Censorship resistance, so inclusion lists or similar commitments, just make sure that transactions get in, helping out on the neutrality side of things. And then again, like back to this market-driven commitments like philosophy of Ethereum, we want to optimize block usage for different use cases, whether that's DeFi, whether that's roll-ups of different kinds, whether that's like bridging and interop and pre-confs, while also maintaining the neutrality of the underlying platform. So in terms of services that can consume these proposer commitments, I think next we'll hear from some people building some interesting block-based futures that actually allow you to potentially tokenize these things and trade them around, so another fun asset class. And if you're an application, maybe you want to hedge out your exposure to gas prices. Maybe you want to reserve some throughput because you have something that needs to happen on a regular basis. And you don't, you want to solve for this fundamental problem of L1s, that you got 1,000 different applications on there, anyone can deploy one. So then what happens when somebody's throughput needs and willingness to pay starts to push everybody else out? These sort of commitments can help address those sorts of issues for applications that need that resiliency. Event-driven services, so you go to the app chain world, you have all these modules that every day or when certain criteria are hit, different things are happening within the chain that are they're not driven by transactions. They're driven by the fact that it's 7 o'clock or the fact that it's a Wednesday. You can make use of proposer commitments to do event-driven services that do this when that happens. So you're building in DeFi, you want your liquidations to work in a particular way. You want users to be able to throw capital in and get first shot on liquidations that happen in your platform. You could potentially do that by paying for additional commitments from the set of validators who are actually validating your service. Pre-comps, we beat this one to death, UX unconstrained by block times. Users are getting used to this on L2s, even though most don't entirely know what's happening when it tells them that, oh yes, you're good. But we need to find ways to bring this to other systems as well. Application-specific sequencing is a really interesting one. It really gives you new dimensions for applications to compete on UX by just imposing additional constraints on all this. Inclusion lists, MPC, threshold encryption. There's like a whole textbook of like interesting ideas that people are pursuing here. Applications that consume these services, obviously DeFi, NFT and token launches, cross-chain bridges and interop, roll-up sequencing, anything subversive. There are now transactions that you can send on Ethereum that might sit there for a while until somebody actually picks them up. And so for the first 10 years of crypto's existence, I think you could argue that facilitating subversion was a big part of most of its breakout successes. And actually being able to provide guarantees that enable this, even in a world where BlackRock owns 70% of the ETH, is probably something we should be thinking about. In terms of future EIPs, making changes to these networks, this creates this marketplace for experiments, and I think that's super important. So the role of restaking. So restaking on Eigen layer, you have these assets. They're staked. Maybe it's ETH. It's staked to the beacon chain. You want to basically put that up and use that to secure commitments that you're making around other services that the same set of operators are actually provisioning. So it's all opt-in. A series of smart contracts on-chain provide these on-chain APIs that enforce these rules of these external modules that these operators are running, these AVSs, via slashing and other sort of operator penalties. If you're making these long-running commitments and you want to make sure that people are actually going to honor these things, even if they're out of the money by the time they have to deliver, burning up all of their ETH is probably a good start to making sure that they do what they're supposed to be doing. It may be that that's still not quite good enough. If you get a block and you could break your commitments and make 40 ETH, things start to get a little more interesting. But this clearly gives you a direction of travel to start securing these things. So these applications, they can inherit Ethereum-grade security without spinning up a whole separate validator set. And so you get this neutral marketplace for security to extend trust to new protocols. The value chain. So you've already seen from most of the folks here, applications, rollups, et cetera, they're creating the demand here. And they need to have a willingness to pay for these guarantees as well. Then you have these marketplaces that are bringing together the supply side and the demand side and coordinating the interaction between them. It's opt-in, you're providing these guarantees. Standardization, you've heard like 100 times already today, is super critical. If we end up in a world where there are 1,000 opportunities to run different commitment sidecars, but it's thinly spread across all of them and there's no standardization whatsoever, then the only people who are going to be able to take advantage of that are larger operations that have a whole bunch of very expensive DevOps people. So this also is all about keeping things as decentralized as possible. And then on the supply side, your validators, they have ETH that's staked, now can be restaked and help to secure these additional commitments that they're making. And then finally, settlement. So slashing is a bit of a blunt instrument, but it is effective for securing a lot of things. To just get that basic incentive-compatible security, the profit of actually faulting, going back on the commitments you've made, needs to be less than the cost of corruption to you. That's what you're going to lose for breaking the promise. So there's a paper that came out from some folks at Eigen earlier in the year around StakeSure, which is a proof-of-stake mechanism to go a little stronger than that by adding redistribution to the picture. So you can provide even stronger guarantees for the actual users of these services and applications if the harm from corruption is constrained by the amount of assets that can actually be seized and redistributed to affected parties in a fault. So our roadmap was published recently. You should go find it in our docs. Step in the right direction. But this is a big area of focus for us, and we think it's going to be really important for experiments in this area and many other sorts of services that people want to build where they'll need these guarantees. So where are we today? We're still early. What do you actually need to build out the full ecosystem here? You need standards, you need production deployment, validators actually running these things, and then you need application demand. And so the last three panels, we hit a little bit of each of these. I've seen some numbers now that we're maybe getting to 5% commit boost penetration, depending on who you ask and how you do the math on it. We have a bunch of work happening as well at the application layer to figure out how to standardize before trying to make big use of these commitments. So the pieces are coming together. This is a comparison you could draw. I don't actually think it's a great one. So with MEV boost, right? It was 0, it was 0, it was 0, and then in 2 months it went almost up to 100%. The thing there is there's no network effects here, really. There are network effects in terms of its impact on chain dynamics, but you as an individual could just decide to adopt this, and you didn't need to coordinate with everybody else out there running infrastructure. So here we have some more challenges because, again, which sidecar do we run? Which commitments do we make? What applications do we serve? And the standardization is going to be really important there to make sure that the barrier to entry is kept low, and interfacing with this whole thing is straightforward. So, where are we going next? Block-based markets are going to continue to increase in complexity. Proposer commitments and restaking can really redefine how block space is sold, bought, and enforced. We have tons of different teams, many of which that you've heard from today or will hear from soon, who are establishing and refining these standards. They're demonstrating diverse ways to actually implement these commitments to address issues like MEV, censorship, and block space usage efficiency. And then we need to get to the point where we've actually deployed a critical mass of validators running these things so that applications can actually plug in there and start buying these commitments and not have to wait a week to get a validator that has opted into what they need. So, future outlook. We're going to see deeper integration of restaking in block production. We're going to see new services, new application layer possibilities. We may even see, previewing future L1 upgrades, making use of the whole ETHGas framework and restaking and these commitments to test things out before we go and hard fork the whole network. So, what you should do if you're not already, learn more about proposer commitments, how EigenLayer provides tools for building and securing off-chain services and creates a marketplace of trust that can be useful for these sorts of things, and help us all, shape this next generation of these Ethereum block-based markets. Cool. Thank you.